My name is Jim Kaseman, and welcome back. We're talking about getting to know God intimately. And of course, in order to do that, it's one thing to know some things about God, but then it's another thing to know how he thinks, how he acts, and why he does the things that he does. And we've been talking about blood covenant. And God, when it comes to redemption, he only works through blood covenant, no other way. And when it comes to walking and working together with God today, it's all through new blood covenant is how he works with us. So we need to be familiar with covenant. So we've talked quite a bit now about the Abrahamic covenant. And that is the basis for the new blood covenant. This is just a type and shadow of the real thing that Jesus would fulfill when he'd come on this earth. He would fulfill the Abrahamic covenant. Now, I want to go back to the Genesis 15, and I want to bring these verses to our attention again. It says then in verse 13 of Genesis 15, "Then he said to Abram, know certainly that your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs, and will serve them, and they will afflict them for 400 years. Now, in the middle of this covenant that he's cutting with Abram, with God the Son taking his place, he interrupts it, and he mentions this. And of course, we know this is Egypt, and that they were there for 400 years being afflicted by the Egyptians. And also the nation whom they serve, I will judge afterward, and they shall come out with great possessions." Well, we can right away see what's being talked about. Here's Exodus chapter 12, because after 400 years, Egypt was judged, and the Hebrews came out of Egypt with great possessions that the Egyptians had actually given them. Now, as for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace. All right. So then, what God has done right here? He's cut covenant with with Abram through God the Son. Now, at this place, God the Son is not a human being. He is still God the Son. And so then, in the future, 4,000 years down the road, he is going to take on the form of a human being. But now there's things that have to happen on the way. And one thing is that God needs to, when it comes time for the cross, remember the apostle, well, not the apostle, but John the Baptist made these comments a couple of times, as in John chapter 1 and in verse 29. The next day John saw Jesus coming toward him and said, "Behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world." And then verse 36, "And looking at Jesus as he walked, he said, Behold, the Lamb of God." Now, God was going to need a substitute. Now remember, he said to Abraham said to Isaac, when Isaac said, "Where's the offering?" And Abraham said, God will provide a substitute for himself. And so God needed a lamb. The lamb, behold the Lamb of God. There would be a lamb that would be offered up on the altar of cross. So God would need a lamb. Well, then we come to Exodus chapter 12, and here's a foreshadowing of the blood. And I'll come right up here and we'll pick it up, well, let's see, in verse 1 of Exodus 12. "Now the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, This month shall be your beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. Speak to all the congregation of Israel, saying, On the 10th of this month, every man shall take for himself a lamb." That's on the 10th of the month. "According to the house of his father, a lamb for the household." And then verse 5, "Your lamb shall be without blemish, a male of the first year. You must take it from the sheep or from the goats. Now you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month." So the 10th, they take the lamb, and then they keep it till the 14th. Now during those 5 days, they are examining the lamb to make sure that it's still without spot or blemish. And then he said, "You shall take some of the blood." Well, he said, "Then the whole assembly of the congregation shall kill it at twilight. If it's spotless and without blemish after 5 days, then you kill it. And they shall take some of the blood and put it on the 2 doorposts and on the lintels of the houses where they eat it. Then you shall eat the flesh on that night, roasted in fire, with unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it. Do not eat it raw, nor boiled at all with water, but roasted in fire, its head and its legs and its entrails. You shall let none of it remain until morning, and what remains of it until morning you shall burn with fire. Now, verse 13, the blood shall be a sign for you on the houses where you are. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you, and the plague and shall not be on you to destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. So this day shall be to you a memorial, and you shall keep it as a feast to the Lord throughout your generations by an everlasting ordinance. And of course, ordinance. All right. So then they did just that. And then the final plague came. And can you imagine how many lambs were killed that day, come to think of it? Every one of them, there's several million people there. And they're all roasting these lambs. There had to be, you talk about smoke going up with all these lambs being roasted at the same time. And but then after they had done that, pick out the lambs according to your families and kill the Passover lamb. And you shall take a bunch of hyssop, dip it in the water that is in the basin, and strike the lintel and the 2 doorposts with the blood that is in the basin, and none of you shall go out of the door of the house until morning. All right, so now the blood that covers the doorway. And it's interesting, there's also water in that hyssop. So water and blood were applied to the doorway. All right, now the Lord will pass through to strike the Egyptians. And when he sees the blood on the lintel and on the 2 doorposts, the Lord will pass over the door and not allow the destroyer to come into your house to strike you. And you shall observe this thing as an ordinance for you and your sons forever. All right. This is the Passover sacrifice. And so the people then obeyed God. So then, the 10th plague then, verse 29, and it came to pass, this is the 10th plague now, that at midnight, that the Lord struck all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Sarah who sat on his throne to the firstborn of the captive who was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of livestock. So Pharaoh rose in the night, he, all his servants, and all the Egyptians. There was a great cry in Egypt. There was not a house where there was not one dead. Then he called for Moses and Aaron by night and said, Rise, go out from among my people, both you and the children of Israel, and go serve the Lord as you have said. And take your flocks and your herds as you have said, and be gone, and bless me also. And the Egyptians urged the people that they might send them out of the land in haste, for they said, We shall all be dead. So the people took their dough before it was leavened, having their kneading bowls bound up in their clothes on their shoulders. Now the children of Israel had done according to the word of Moses, and they had asked from the Egyptians articles of silver, articles of gold, and clothing. And the Lord had given the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so that they granted them what they requested. Thus they plundered the Egyptians. Now they didn't steal from the Egyptians. This is just, you could say, back salary. The Hebrews got very little pay. So here at the end, they're finally forking up all the pay that they shouldn't give them, really. And they did it cheerfully. Of course, they didn't realize that's what they really were doing. But the Egyptians left them. The Hebrews left Egypt with great possessions. All right, so here then, God then took a lamb, and it was a spotless lamb, and they had to observe it for 5 days before it could be offered up as a sacrifice. I think it's interesting when Jesus came into Jerusalem on Passover Sunday, riding on a donkey. Here was the sacrificial lamb entering Jerusalem. And 5 days later, it was examined. It was without spot, it was without blemish, and we heard Pontius Pilate say, I find no fault in him. And then the lamb was offered up. Wow. You can see all of the parallels. So God was preparing now. He was preparing to bring in the Lamb of God some 4,000 years later. And here was one important step towards that in the offering up of the sinless lamb on Passover. And that, of course, would be carried out when Jesus arrived, as I already mentioned. All right, our time is gone. God bless you until our next time together. And meanwhile, just be blessed in everything you set your hands to do. Amen.